Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us live on Facebook for the second event in Cornwall Council's biggest ever listening campaign, The Cornwall We Want. I'm Sarah Yeoman, news editor at Pirate FM, and I'll be your host for the evening. I'm joined by Cornwall Council Cabinet Member and Portfolio Holder for the Environment, Edwina Hannaford, and guests from charities, businesses and campaign groups. As a reminder, you can ask questions or post your thoughts in the comments section as we go, and I'll do my best to read as many of them out as I can. There's only one topic on our agenda tonight. We're here to talk about the environment, how we can protect it, how we can tackle climate change, and how we can grow the green economy here in Cornwall. We want to hear your ideas, your opinions, your hopes and fears, so we can start a conversation. As with our first event, this isn't a debate. There are no sides, there are no right or wrong questions or answers. We're not here to talk about council tax or bin collections, important as those things are. Our focus tonight is on the environment we want. So now I'd like to introduce Councillor Edwina Hannaford.
Thank you, Sarah, and welcome to everyone to Cornwall Council's The Environment We Want discussion. It's clear to us that climate emergency and caring for our environment is extremely important to all of us. I'm just going to give a quick update on some of the things that Cornwall Council have achieved since declaring a climate emergency in January 19. I think we've achieved quite a lot, but there's still a lot to do. So to tackle Cornwall's existing older housing, we have secured £8 million to retrofit over 700 homes with energy efficient measures and solar power. The Benton Teague smart grid wind turbine is constructed and will begin generating energy next month. We have a bus subsidies pilot underway, providing more affordable public transport for all. Cormac are using biomethane run van and hotbox as a pilot for renewable biofuels. £500,000 of community infrastructure levy money has been aligned to climate change projects, and the first phase of the Saints Way has been completed. The Forest for Cornwall first trees are in the ground, not more to do, of course, and we are using a decision-making wheel in all the decisions of the council. We launched recently the Carbon Neutral Cornwall Hive, an online platform to share experiences and information. And we've set up a sector specialist partnership forum for working together in the main emitting sectors. The first localism climate change workshop has been held, with more planned very shortly. And we've been involved in a schools eco conference held, with more planned for next year. So we are also developing other innovative projects to support our response to the climate emergency, and they include the Climate Emergency Development Plan document, which will set climate change planning policy, developing an electric vehicle infrastructure network, and we've ordered our first wave of electric fleet vehicles, and I'm taking delivery of an electric bike to trial next week. We've developed carbon accounting practices and carbon literacy training for all of our 6,000 staff. And we have been involved in an Interreg schools project. The local nature recovery pilot, one of only 5, sets out the strategy for how we will bring back nature to Cornwall. And through the local enterprise partnership, the local industrial strategy has aligned policies to be green, clean and inclusive growth. And we've match funded geothermal trials at United Downs and Eden Project. We know that working in partnership is essential if we have any hope of reaching our ambitious target of Cornwall becoming carbon neutral by 2030. To this end, I have a couple of exciting announcements to make. So I'm delighted to announce that we are working with Crowdfunder to make over £200,000 available through 3 funds: the Low Carbon Projects, Town and Parish Councils and Community Groups Action Planning, the Forest for Cornwall, and you'll be able to learn more about our first Carbon Neutral Cornwall Hive event in September. We'll be sharing details of that event shortly. As we continue our recovery and renewal from COVID-19 pandemic, we have committed to placing climate change at the heart of everything that we do. We may be gaining ground on the COVID-19 emergency, although that become clearer. We know that the climate emergency, it never went away. It's with us now. And we will prioritise within our recovery and renewal all things that will impact on future generations. So it's good to see some young people here with us tonight. Which is why we've recently pledged to accelerate delivery of our climate change action plan. And we are joined this evening by a panel of experts in their own fields of conservation, farming, renewable energy, as well as representatives from the community action groups across Cornwall. So I'm really excited to hear about what you are doing and how we can work together to make a real difference to tackle climate change and make the environment we want for Cornwall for future generations. It's really clear to me Cornwall Council can't do this on our own. This is something that we have to do collectively, one and all for Cornwall. Thank you, and I'll hand back to Sarah.
Lovely, thank you, Edwina. So now we're going to go to our first video of the evening, where we'll hear from Hugo Taghome from Surfers Against Sewage about how we can protect our marine environment, and Carolyn Cadman, who's here with us tonight, about some of the work Cornwall Wildlife Trust is currently involved in.
Hi, I'm Hugo Taghome, the Chief Executive of the National Marine Conservation and Campaigning charity Surfers Against Sewage. And we're very proud to lead our campaigns from Cornwall, campaigns on some of the biggest issues affecting our ocean and environment today. We have 4 key pillars of action on the plastic pollution crisis, on the ongoing water quality issues in our rivers and in our ocean, on the loss of biodiversity through the call to restore big parts of our ocean and terrestrial habitats with rewilding projects, and then of course the overarching issue of ocean and climate crisis, which is impacting not just Cornwall but our ocean around the world and countries around the world. There's never been a more important time to engage the public, to mobilise the public in the call to restore our oceans and protect our beaches. This is the decade of ocean science and habitat restoration, and we need to call on our leaders, our political leaders and business leaders, to do much, much more at much faster pace to truly protect and restore our ocean, our beaches and our wider environment. And that's something we're going to be committed to from the beachfront right through to the front benches of Parliament, where we help organise the Ocean Conservation All-Party Parliamentary Group, where we can call for policy and legislation change that will protect Cornwall, the UK and the ocean around the world.
I'm Carolyn Cadman from Cornwall Wildlife Trust. Nature has an amazing ability to trap carbon safely, and nature-based solutions can help to tackle the challenges we face. Cornish hedges absorb pollutants, improve air quality and slow the flow of water across roads and land. Tree planting or wetland habitat creation near the source of a river can also slow the flow of water and reduce the threat of flooding downstream. Nature-based solutions like these can also benefit businesses, tourism, agriculture and improved health and well-being benefits for residents and visitors alike. Last Friday I attended the release of Sigourney into a fenced area in a wooded valley in Bodmin. Beavers used to be native in Cornwall, and by building dams and digging water channels during heavy rainfall, the land can hold more water, which doesn't flow as quickly into rivers, reducing the risk of floods. Slower water means cleaner water, as there's more time for soil and pollutants to settle and more wetland habitat to provide space for other wildlife to thrive. Find out more, cornwallwildlifetrust.org.uk.
Okay, so a question for our panel. Other than its people, the natural environment is probably Cornwall's most valuable asset. How can we do more to protect it? And if people could introduce themselves to us before they start speaking, that would be great. Yes, I can see Mandy, you've got your hand up there. Can't hear you there. Okay, Edward.
I haven't actually, but I'm really happy.
I think we're having a couple of sound issues. Let me see. Who's got their hand up? Edward, did you want to say something? Edward, we can't hear. Okay, Shelley, I'm going to go to you. Can you hear us?
Hopefully, can you hear me?
Yes, sounding great.
Right. Cool. Yeah, it was great to hear the SAS and talking about stuff against sewage, and they've been going for so many years and drawing attention to us. And I think it would be really lovely if the council could start seeing, you know, Cornwall as it doesn't just end, you know, with the land. The sea is very much part of it. And I don't know, like, so I'm a teacher and I'm working down in Penzance at the moment, and students are really kind of fed up with just drawing pictures of look at the litter and round the neck of this turtle and putting posters up in classrooms that they already see. They want to do something real. I think it would be amazing if we could have youth workers available on our coast or in our parks and things like this, enabling us to work and interface more with nature, with young people. I also think it'd be an amazing thing to think about having boats. We need to encourage our young people to be travelling, using boat and sea. I've got a son who works very much in the sailing industry, and he said a lot of his mates who live in Cornwall and live in Penzance feel like they go up country and then they come back and they feel like they're the end of the line. And he said he feels like he's at the beginning of the world, and I think that's a really important thing. And if we can encourage our young people to use the sea as a mode of transport, to develop the skills in those sorts of ways, but also to protect the marine life and everything that's out there, would be absolutely brilliant. Cornwall Wildlife Fund have been a trust, have been amazing. Nick Taylor, who's one of the wildlife volunteer coordinators rather, has been working closely with Mounts Bay, and recently did stuff with our for our detox festival. And it's about making things very real. Students are fed up, you know, we're past the stage of, I'm sorry, we don't have a form for that. We need to be helping our young people do real things. I could waffle on loads, but I'll shut up and let somebody else get in.
Carolyn, I know you've got your hand up. Do you want to jump in? And could you introduce yourself to us as well?
Yeah, hello everyone, I'm Carolyn Cadman, Chief Exec of Cornwall Wildlife Trust, and thanks for the invitation along tonight. Yeah, building on what Shelley just said, we've had some real moments in Cornwall Wildlife Trust over the last 3 years with a programme that we've got called Your Shore Beach Rangers, where we're taking school children and young people through a programme with Cornwall College and various other partners, I should say, through a programme where we remove all the barriers to get them in the sea. We handhold them in, we take them on snorkel safaris and rock pool rambles and various ways in which just to get them wet and confident in the sea. And that we found that absolutely starts them on a journey from being, you know, interested in something like surfing because it's a bit cool, through to being really concerned about what's in the sea, the marine species that are in there. And what we're trying to do at the moment with the various funding streams that are available is trying to learn as much as we possibly can from that marine youth experience and all the community groups that have sprung up around marine issues, both hosted by ourselves but also by Surfers Against Sewage, and try and turn some of that energy onto the land as well. Because nature on land is not really seen as being as cool as marine nature and conservation issues. So we want to kind of embrace what's good about
marine conservation and sprinkle a bit of that magic on our terrestrial work. So that's something we're hopeful of doing. And we are really determined to inspire as many young people as possible and give them the tools, give them the equipment, give them the ideas and the skills to actually do something about the climate crisis and the ecological crisis, because it's here, it's real, and they want to do something, and we can support them in doing it.
Of course. So we're going to take a couple of questions from Facebook. So we've got one from Nicola Tompkinson, who says, we seem to be building everywhere, taking away our beautiful fields and homes for animals. What do people think about that?
I'm happy to speak if no one else is.
Go ahead.
Well, just a little statistic, and I don't want to go on about statistics, but over 40% of nature of species are under threat in the UK, and Cornwall reflects that trend. There's a few drivers that are pushing that decline. One is climate change, one is intensive agriculture, another is intensive fishing, but a big one is also development, where habitat space is being lost. So I'm not happy with a build agenda with no regulation in place. But I'm interested in reading the planning reforms that have come out today and seeing what the future holds.
Of course. And Oliver, I think you wanted to jump in.
Thank you. Yes, I'm Oliver Baines. I'm a farmer, member of the local nature partnership, and also a member of Extinction Rebellion. And I think what we've heard here are some fabulous examples of local activities, but the questioner or the guy or person who just made that comment has pointed out this disjunct that takes place between the amazing work that people like the Wildlife Trust are doing and some really harmful activities that are taking place on a bigger scale. And it is, part of it is about impact of housing on the environment, but it's also the impact of new roads. We've got the new A30 being built, which, in spite of whatever compensation is provided, will encourage further transport, further cars. We've got people buying larger, greedier cars. So while this amazing stuff is happening, we've got a much bigger issue which is looming over us, which is that carbon emissions in Cornwall are not coming down. And so we need to be reducing our emissions by 13% every single year, and there's no sign yet that we're anywhere close to achieving that target.
Okay, and another question is, how do we balance new homes which are necessary and protecting natural habitats? What do people think about that? Edwina, I think you want to jump in.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, the questioner is quite right. People still need homes, but I think we have to be really, really careful about who we're building homes for and the quality of the homes that we're building. So although we've got that investment of 8 million quid into retrofitting homes, we have to make sure that the homes that we build for the future don't need to be retrofitted. And I think we have to build with nature. I know that Cornwall Wildlife Trust have got a benchmarking programme that they're working on, working with Cornwall Council. So for me, it's about right homes in the right place for the right people, but it's also about the quality of those homes. As far as the commuting and usage of cars, you're quite right, it has been going up, but interestingly, through the pandemic, it did come down significantly. So just in Cornwall Council, we saved or stopped doing 42,000 commuting miles a day. I mean, that's astounding. I haven't used my car for 5 months. So what we need to do is to make sure that we get the momentum of the different ways of working, whether that's more working from home or working in perhaps local hubs rather than I've worn a group up the A30 over the years, so I don't want to go back to that. So I think we need to take this learning from what's happened over the last 5 months and make sure that we capitalise on that And so we don't need to build new roads, that we are more localised in our approach to a whole range of things, really.
Of course. And Rob, I think you wanted to jump in and say something.
Yeah, hi, Rob Halliday. I'm a tenant farmer from South East Cornwall, and I'm also NFU Deputy Chairman. Edwina, just interested in what you were saying there with regards to localism and housing. How much of an effect is this week's announcements from central government on planning? How much control do you think you're going to lose locally, and how much direction can we actually have influence over ourselves going forwards?
Yeah, thank you, Rob. I'm really worried about it, and I think Caroline's build is incredibly worrying. I can only speak on behalf of my own town council. I'm on the planning committee there, and we've written to all the other town and parish councils in South East Cornwall saying we need to work together to say, actually, we're losing that local control and that local flavour. Yes, there is a delivery issue, but I go back to my previous comment, right houses, right place, and for the right people. So I'm not happy about that at all. I'm really concerned as a chair of the local neighbourhood plan. Been working on that for several years. I mean, it's all our work, and all those opinions and needs of local people are just going to be walked over. I'm sorry, the centralised model doesn't work, and certainly doesn't work for Cornwall. So I'm really worried about it, Rob. So town and parish councils are rising up, so I hope others will too.
Thanks, Edwina. So we're going to move on to our second video of the night, this time from our panellist, Oliver Baines, on agriculture and the green economy.
Hello, my name is Oliver Baines. I'm a member of the Local Nature Partnership. I'm a farmer, and I'm also a member of Extinction Rebellion. I have strong views on the environment, particularly with farming, where I think we can make a major contribution. First of all, through improving soil health, which means dramatically reducing our use of sprays and fertilizers, expanding organic farming. I think we need to look at expanding horticulture and reducing livestock numbers. And I think issues around open canopy woodland and agroforestry need serious attention. There's also a big public dimension to this, which is about better design for public access to the countryside so that people can have better access. I also think allotments on the edges of towns and villages, community-supported agriculture schemes, and lots of issues around food supply, localising food supply. Thank you.
Okay, so some interesting suggestions there from Oliver. Agriculture is obviously a huge part of Cornwall's economy and will play a major role in helping us tackle the climate crisis. Rob, as an NFU representative, who would you like to respond to some of the points that Oliver made?
Yeah, I would, absolutely. I mean, I thoroughly agree that agriculture is a huge player in the county, and we're representative of controlling a large sector of the land, and therefore we have a responsibility to ourselves, who obviously are at very much the forefront of climate change. We probably feel it more than anybody else, the effect on our lives as yours, but also from the point of view of the effect it has on our business. The only things I would sort of counter, I think we have to be very careful about going wholly and solely down an organic route. We have to be a little bit careful that we have a society that needs to be fed at all different price points, and we need to be a little bit careful that if we ratchet ourselves up to such a level, the only way those people are going to be fed is if we import their food from places that we don't have control. And I do have concerns over particularly an American deal. We're getting some very, very thinly veiled assurances from government, I feel, on the food that's going to be imported. And we need equivalence of standards. That's really, really important. We have world-beating standards in the UK. There's always room for improvement. But I think that we need to recognise what we've got. The climate we have is, fantastically good for agriculture. And if anything, looking at climate change on a world basis, we look to be doing considerably better than numerous other places. So I think we need to enhance the environment to support our farming where we can, but not lose sight of the fact that we need a profitable agricultural sector to be able to invest in environmental goods.
And Christine, you've got your hand up. Was there something you wanted to say about that?
Yeah, so evening everyone. My name's Chris Koenig. I am the Technical Director at Weybridge Renewable Energy Network. We're a small community energy organisation in North Cornwall. And I just wanted to highlight the good symbiotic relationship that you can have between renewable energy and agriculture. We've seen already across the county with regards to solar farms and some wind farms where the farmers are still able to graze sheep and in certain areas to grow certain crops underneath it. And in fact, I've seen reports with regards to sheep being particularly liking the shade that is casted by solar arrays. So I think there are ways in which agriculture and renewable energy can go forward hand in hand and sort of produce a double outcome. And also in other areas, there's also opportunity to increase biodiversity where it's not necessarily on agricultural land.
Thanks, Christine. So I'm going to take a question from Facebook. So this is from Victoria Harrison. She says, how about wildflower nature verges as you come into towns? Rotherham saved money with 8 miles of wildlife verges. We also need to be growing more fees. How about more allotment space or help for people to grow at home? What do people think about that one? Edwina, I think your hand is raised.
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to highlight, I think it's a really good point, that we've been looking at the way in Cornwall Council we cut our verges. It was only a few years ago that we used to be getting complaints. You haven't cut that verge, that hedge is overgrown. People wanted it to be manicured and looked like it was cut back and therefore loved. Actually, I've got the opposite view to that. And so we've launched with Highways and our Environment Service a sort of when to mow and when to grow. So we've actually cut back the number of times that we do cut those verges, but we're doing that through negotiation with our towns and our communities. So we'll be talking to town and parish councils and asking them, you know, does that path really need cutting? They'll say, yeah, all the mums and dads go to school that way, and if it's overgrown they can't get the prams through. But actually over there it would be fantastic to do a bit of pollinating, sowing. So I think it's about a balance, and it's through negotiation with communities, but I think we should be doing a lot more of that. So we've completely changed our verge maintenance policy to reflect and to encourage wildflowers. Even done it out at County Hall as well. Some fantastic, not that I've seen them for 5 months, but we are trying to strike that balance.
And Dawn, I think you wanted to say something on this as well.
Yes, hello everyone, my name's Dawn and I'm from crowdfunder.co.uk and we're based in Newquay in Cornwall. And I just wanted to build on Edwina's opening remarks where she said that there's over £200,000 worth of funding on Crowdfund Cornwall at the moment. And by that, what I was thinking about, if communities wanted to come together and develop shared spaces where they can encourage nature to come through and break through, they can do that through crowdfunding money to raise the funds they need to make that happen. And we've got 3 new funds coming onto Crowdfunder, the Town and Council Parish Fund, the Carbon Neutral Fund, and we've got a sort of raft of other funds where people have used this funding to, you know, look after their environment and bring the community together around things that they really care about in Cornwall. So lots of people are doing it, and it's definitely something I would suggest people look at if they feel passionate about something environmental that they want to change in their area.
And Edward, I can see you've raised your hand. Did you want to say something about it as well? Oh, Edward, we can't hear you. Not sure if your microphone is muted. Not sure. We'll have to come back to you. Okay, we'll go on to another question from Facebook. So this is from Rebecca Ryder. She says, how can we work together to reduce the use of pesticides in gardens, parks, roads and pavements?
I'm sure Oliver's got something to say on that.
Oliver, jump in.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, this is a really kind of vexing subject because there is such debate about the use of sprays, whatever type of pesticides we're talking about, and there are many different classes, and they have many different effects, and especially cocktails of different groups of chemicals can do enormous damage. And we know how degraded our soils have become in agriculture, in large parts of agriculture, not all of it, obviously, and there's some soils in Cornwall which are very rich, luckily. But the use of them, if we want to reduce the use of sprays within, let's say, on verges or within villages and the hamlets, I think in political terms, the only way it's likely to happen is where people see that there's a connection to human health or damage to human health through the use of sprays. In farming, of course, it's rather different because as organic farmers, we think that the damage that sprays do are largely to the microbiota in soil, so that the soil health is so important for farming. And for capturing carbon through soil organic matter and soil carbon. But it's a slightly different subject in terms of, we're looking at ways of reducing the use of sprays. I think it's rather different in agriculture and in the community. But we have to get a grip on this because the damage it's done to the ecology is just enormous.
And Carolyn, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, we Cornwall Wildlife Trust benefits from funding from South West Water to work with landowners and farmers to help give them advice about how to manage their farms around certain drinking water catchments across Cornwall. And we found that once we've developed a relationship with the farmer and convinced the farmer that we're not going to be that we're there to help them as well as to help wildlife and water quality. They're much more likely to work with us and to do things like soil testing and to take a leap of faith, but informed by the science, that they can actually reduce or in some case remove the nutrients or pesticides that they're putting on their land, that their parents and their grandparents who also farmed the land also used to do, and they can start breaking those habits with confidence that their productivity and their profitability doesn't go down. And I think that's kind of key. It's building knowledge and awareness, skills and trust back into the farming system, and not being the medical equivalent is relying on a tablet to make you feel better. Whereas now we're realising that nature has benefits for your well-being. Well, in farming, we need farmers to realise that nature has benefits for farming as well. And to make that and to normalise that in farming practice, which to be fair, Cornwall is getting much better and is pretty good at that.
And Christine, was there something you wanted to say on that one as well?
Yeah, I was just going to sort of talk about consumer choice, really. Obviously, Oliver has mentioned organic gardening, and within his vlog, he talked about community supported agriculture. We're very fortunate here in Weybridge to have our own community supported agriculture, the Camel CSA, that run a 2 organic principles veggie box scheme. And not only does it provide a fantastic day out for the family if anyone wants to get involved and bring themselves in touch with nature a little bit more and understand where their food comes from, but it also produces the lowest carbon food that can be bought in the local area. and it's full of nutrients and no pesticides at all. So I just like to say that other communities, and I'm sure there are other communities across Cornwall that have got similar arrangements, but it's up to us as consumers of food to make the right choices as well.
Edwina, did you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, thank you very much for that. So Cornwall Council have very much taken a lead on the banning of certain pesticides, glyphosates and neonicotinoids. So we have, through a motion that I brought to Council in 2016, we banned the use of them for weed control, our weed control. Part of that was also a pollinators action plan, and you can find details of that on the Grow Nature Toolkit page on the Cornwall Council website. There's lots of really good tips in there, and you can actually read the pollinators action plan. But I do agree with Oliver, there is a difference between community and farming. Sometimes they're necessary, but I would prefer they weren't, because I do firmly believe that there is a link between the use of those and on human health. So I'd like to think that others that are responsible for control of weeds and verges, especially our town and parish councils, might take a lead from Cornwall Council and adopt the pollinators action plan. I think we've still got a little way to go with some of our contractors. I do hear I witnessed somebody using it on our land down at Baines, and I stopped him. I said, "Why are you using that? You're not supposed to." So I think that means all of us have a bit of a responsibility. Now you know that fact. If you see somebody using glyphosate on our land, I want to know about it. Thank you.
So going to take a question from Facebook, and this is from Sean Stratton. He says, we need to become food secure. That means protecting farmland and not importing as much food from around the world. What do people think about that? Who's got their hand raised? Carolyn, was there something you wanted to say on that?
Sorry, I'm just being very slack and I'd forgotten to lower my hand, so perhaps someone else, give a chance to someone else to speak.
No problem at all. Who have we got? Rob, did you want to jump in on that one?
Yeah, I mean, we talk about, and this is the story that's always told of, you know, what happens if we see U-boats in the channel again. Well, that's realistically, that's not the threat of our time. The hypothetical U-boat in the channel is actually climate change. And we really do have to be very, very careful that we don't export our food production to other countries from the point of view of not only food security, but also having control of what we produce. And it's quite interesting, just sort of harking back to the last conversation a little bit, and that there is a massive movement in farming, and particularly I think in Cornwall, where we have a lot of pasture-based agriculture, regenerative agriculture, looking at how we can use livestock to improve soils that's a real buzzword at the moment. And people are very keen to learn that farmers are not switched off the ideas at all. I think we have to be a little bit careful of not following rhetoric, particularly on things like herbicide and pesticide use. Absolutely, we need to look from a business point of view as much as anything else. Farmers don't want to be spending money on these costs if they're not effective. But also, from the point of view of the environment, we have to be careful what we use. But just taking the example of glyphosate in agriculture, which is very different to your parks and gardens example, the use of low rates of glyphosate may actually mean that we don't have to plough soils to get rid of weed burden, and therefore we're actually helping to retain carbon in the soil, and we're also not disturbing soil on what can be some quite steep hills in Cornwall, and having the erosion effect that goes with it. But all this it's a circular conversation. It all comes back to the fact that if we can keep our food production local, then we can over time control and finesse these matters to come up with the best result for us and our environment.
Can I jump in here?
Sorry. Oliver, what are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think Rob makes some important points, actually. I don't think there's a good case to be made for the removal of all sprays. Let's leave it at that. I mean, we need to look at drastically reducing their use, but it'd be very, very hard to sustain farming if you remove them altogether from everywhere. If only because some intensive production is probably still required, in order to feed our people. We've got to remember that so much of our food is imported at the moment. I think one of the really important points is to look at shortening our supply chains, and if we can grow everything we possibly can within Cornwall that we need within Cornwall, that's a real bonus for us. We have to export. I mean, from Cornwall, we have to export, of course, because we have such a large livestock sector. So we would have to export, but we can shift across to horticulture, but only we can only do any of these things without central government support. We need the incentives, because otherwise people will simply go bust. So we have to have a framework of support for farmers which allows them to make the transition. And if we can do that, then we can achieve our goals.
Amanda, were you trying to say something before? Did you want to jump in?
I'm not sure if my sound's working.
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Brilliant. Okay, just a quick point, really. This is where the sort of systems thinking comes in, and it goes back to what we were saying previously about housing. If we build houses where people haven't got access to green spaces or allotments or gardens, we will continue the complete disconnect between ourselves and the outside world. We still refer to nature as something other than us, whereas of course we're just as much part of nature as your nearest caterpillar or cow, really. And if we thought about it in terms of cohabiting, we just tend to behave quite badly in that space as one of the species. So if we think about it as cohabiting, we understand that growing our food and understanding the benefit of that in our natural environment is connected also to the sorts of houses that we've got. And we found a way also to take individual responsibility. So we can't blame farmers for growing stuff that is shipped outside Cornwall if we don't buy it from them down here. So it's trying to find ways in which we don't build lots of supermarkets, working with our local planning structures, but also try as far as possible, if you've got anywhere local that is selling local fruit and veg, buy the local fruit and veg. Not everybody can do that. If you can, we should absolutely be doing that. That makes it more available to local people. So it's about those big structural issues like housing and making sure we get the right sort of housing in the right place for the right people with the right sort of access to green space so people can grow. And it's about taking individual action, understanding that we are cohabiting in a space and taking responsibility for doing the thing that we can at individual and family level to support these bigger ideas.
Can I come in on that, Shelley? I'd just like to say that I think the whole way in which we connect with everybody is really important, and how everybody talks to each other. It was great what Caroline was saying, how when she talks to the farmers, and actually people, we need to stop demonizing each other and actually looking at what everybody's got on offer. We've got amazing, wonderful people down here. The artists, we haven't talked about all the artists that are down here at the moment that can do things. But one of the main things I think in relation to what you were just saying is how we view waste. And I almost want to get rid of the word waste and call it byproduct. There's so many things that we look at to help people grow and develop things, but we're just throwing so much away in terms of calling it waste. I recently set up in the school an allotment, and kids started growing and they loved it, absolutely love it, getting their hands in the soil. But when we got some of the council, which was lovely, thank you to the council, you donated us a load of compost, but because it had to go through all these safety measures, it was dead as a dodo, and I had to enrich it with good, honest shit from my horses. And I think every horse produces at least like 300 pounds of poo a year. Do you know what I mean? The dung beetles they attract feed the soil. We need to really look at how the whole social structure is created, and how we need to recognize that there needs to be a cycle that goes on. Eliminate the word waste. Introduce a network where people can advertise the byproduct that they have, and then somebody else might want it.
Thank you, Shelley. So we're now going to move on to our final video of the evening, and we'll hear from the Weybridge Renewable Energy Network about their community's hopes for a greener and cleaner future.
I'd like to see more electric car chargers in Cornwall.
I would like to see more community tree planting in Cornwall. I'd like to see more rooftop solar panels.
I'd like to see farmers in Cornwall supported to restore soil carbon.
I'd like to see more biodiversity in green spaces in Cornwall.
I'd like to see more people commuting by bike.
I'd like to see lots more big wind farms in Cornwall.
I'd like to grow up with more sustainability in the curriculum in Cornwall.
Okay, so as we know, Cornwall's the perfect place to generate wave, wind and solar power. Christine, as part of the Weybridge Renewable Energy Network, what more do you think can be done to promote the use of green energy in our communities?
Yeah, absolutely. I think promotion, even though it feels like it's an established technology now, I mean, it's long gone through its early days of people being skeptical about whether these things work. But it's still a case of communicating and getting people to understand that they have choices around where they buy their energy from and how they get their energy. So at the moment, REN are looking at an energy equality project. So what we're keen to do is to make sure that everyone has access to low carbon renewable energy. If they don't have a roof, if they don't have the funds themselves to install it, that shouldn't be a barrier, and there's absolutely no reason why everyone can't benefit from low carbon renewable energy. And at the moment, a lot of the solar farms and some of the wind turbines that are actually installed within Cornwall don't belong to the local community. They don't belong to anyone who lives within Cornwall. And so that is essentially exporting the value of that straight out of the county. So we're really keen to see more local ownership of renewable energy, and we're working hard and we'll be approaching the Cornwall Council to look at their buildings and whether or not they would be willing for our community to invest in solar on their rooftops. To help balance out our local energy requirements, and in the same way cutting carbon and helping to alleviate fuel poverty.
Thank you. And Tian, I know you had your hand raised. Would you like to share your views on this?
Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can. Would you like to introduce yourself to us as well?
Yes, I'm Tian, and I am one of the organisers of the youth strikes in Truro. And I just wanted to mention something that was said a while ago, but it was about how we can buy local fruit and veg and local food and that sort of thing from farmers and from local places. But I just think there's a really important point to be made there about accessibility and about how not everybody can do that, and not and as important as like individual change like that as, you know, buying local food, like within, like for families and things, a lot of people, I mean, it can be more expensive and it can be even harder to find, and you have to go out of your way than on your like weekly shop and things like that. So I just think that's a really important point to be made, because too often in conversations about climate change and how we can, you know, how we can change things, we leave out points about how not everybody can access it and things like that. So when we talk about change, we have to make sure that it's about system change and about I don't know, for example, schools buying local fruit and veg and doing it through places like schools and places that can get more money to be able to do that, if you understand what I'm saying, rather than putting the focus on individuals and individual families to do that, because I think that can be hard for quite a lot of people. And yeah.
And Edwina, what are your thoughts on that?
I just wanted to comment on what Tian just said. I think it's a really, really important point that she's made. I think one of the features of the pandemic has been people have come alive to the importance of local supply chains, to local networks, whether that's through support and certainly through the local food chains. So I think that local is good because it's not only good for the climate because it's saving food miles, but it's also good for the environment and it's good for society because it's fresher. But we do have to be mindful that not everybody has access to that. As far as renewables, the development plan document, the climate emergency document I spoke about in my introduction, we hope to zone areas, so for renewable energy, because not everywhere is great for renewables. We're also investing in floating offshore wind as well. So I think Cornwall has the potential, forget about the northern powerhouse, I think we've got the Cornish powerhouse. I think that we've got the raw materials and the resources to be net exporters of renewable energy. The problem is that our grid network is not really set up for sending energy to the rest of the country. It's very much set up for bringing it down to us. So this is one of our asks of government, that we need some significant investment into our grid infrastructure to really make sure that we can capitalise it. That wind turbine at Venton Teague was the first wind turbine in Cornwall, erected in Cornwall since 2016. It's those grid connections and also the economics of it, removing subsidies. So somebody spoke about rhetoric earlier on, but we need government help on this. We can't do this on our own. That's massive investment. So if government is really serious about a green recovery, then they need to invest in that infrastructure. We also have a little revolving fund as well. So if there are some local schemes for renewables, you can hook into that as well. I think it's about £3 million in that pot. So it's for all of us. The whole system has to be geared to what you have to want to do it, I think, whether that's us, the community and government.
And Rob, do you want to share your thoughts as well?
Yeah, I mean, Tian, I absolutely echo what you say, and it comes back to my thoughts on price point, that we do have to make sure that we do produce food that everybody can afford. And again, if we can cut our supply chains as energy inevitably becomes more expensive in the future, that localism agenda on making sure that everybody is fed and everybody is fed with good quality food. And that comes from the point of view of, that we now spend about 8% of our disposable income on food, as opposed to about 40% after the Second World War. So, we do have good affordable food in this country, and we need to be able to make sure we can keep that without getting to a point where we're importing food from abroad, whereby somewhere the tab's being picked up. There's no such thing as cheap food. We need good value food. And if we're buying cheap food, there's every likelihood it's the environment somewhere that's picking it up. And particularly the likes of the US, where they use huge amounts of antibiotics, not just for preventing illness in livestock, but actually just as a growth promoter. It's a practice that's banned in this country. And I think we really need to recognise the good standards we have, enhance them, protect them, and make sure that local food is available for local people at the right price.
Thanks, Rob. So going to take a question from Facebook. So this is from Katie Kirk. Her teenage daughters say to her, "We all agree we need to make radical changes and fast, but how? When we get careers advice, it's from random businesses that aren't necessarily good for the environment. Talks from environmental students and businesses, please."
I can jump in on that if I can be heard.
Yes, of course. Go ahead.
I'll switch my camera off because I think my sound is a bit better. I think all of this is connected, and just going back to the food issue, we won't be able to sell local food to more local people unless we have a planning system that allows for that local provision and not just supermarkets. But it goes back to the same point that has just been made by Katie's daughter. If we only bring in the big boys and show that's the way the future is, we will only have a future that looks like the way the big boys are describing it. Cornwall's got an extraordinary history of really small, inventive, creative, edgy, courageous, bloody-minded businesses and social enterprises and organisations and sole traders and individuals who do things in a different way. So I think if we looked better at what we already have in Cornwall and how we do things, rather than trying to do things that we think other people are doing, like big shiny Tonka toys elsewhere, then that is exactly the sort of skills that we can be giving to our young people. They will need to be resilient. and edgy and inventive and know how to collaborate with others and know how to do things by themselves and know how to challenge the status quo. So if we looked more to what the sort of activity that's going on already, such as the School for Social Entrepreneurs and the CSA, Community Supported Agriculture Project, there are so many different examples, creatives and people in the arts and cultural sector that could engage with our students to say, this is what we do. You don't need to sell your soul to one of the big multinationals who we're probably going to bring in to build more supermarkets and housing estates. So it's encouraging our young people to think quite differently about what their future might be and thinking small, actually small and inventive and collaborative rather than big and 20th century.
And Carolyn, can we go to you next, please?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo what Manda said, really. We find in Cornwall Wildlife Trust, when I meet with my other colleagues across the country, I'm really pleased to say that Cornwall is streaks ahead of other parts of the country. We've got a really proactive local authority and a unitary local authority. We've got a load of businesses who place the environment and are really keen to enhance the place they live and the place they work in, and they are here for a lifestyle as much as anything else. And we've got communities who all bump into each other at the school gates, whether they're part of farming, industry, charities, public sector, and we all know each other. And I think the fact that there's these strong connections in Cornwall means that we put the needs of the place strongly at the front and centre of our decision making, and that includes the environment. And it makes my job, to be honest, it makes my job a bit easier than my colleagues across the country. But I'm not going to be complacent, because nature has been in decline since the 1940s, and it will continue to do so unless we take action. And I'm hopeful that the young people on the call today are going to be part of that action going forwards.
And Dawn, I can see you've got your hand up. Did you want to jump in and say something?
Hi. No, I just agree with everyone who's been speaking already, and I think what we're seeing is young people sort of leading the charge to a large extent, which is really, really positive and exciting. And certainly on Crowdfunder, we see lots of projects coming forward where people are taking action, they are getting involved, and in crowdfunding is really strong in Cornwall. We're one of the most dynamic crowdfunding communities in the UK. And a lot of the projects we see do have an environmental twist or bent, and a lot of them involve young people. So I think there's a lot to be positive about, and it's really, really exciting going forward.
Can I just come on to that and to say,
Shelley, go ahead.
I do feel very empowered by the way in which the council has said it's a climate crisis. When we're in school, I felt very empowered by that, to be able to know that we've got the backing of our council, and students feel that and they welcome that. So that's really good. And like Manda was saying, we've got these amazing creatives here, from Cairn to Cove. What a wonderful touring package that is, getting things right out into our communities. We've got everything from Sturts up in the north of Cornwall down to the Minack, right at the very tip, offering all different sorts of arts and telling stories in different ways, and encouraging young people to look at things in new light. The amazing dance and stuff that's going on. And if the council can see that the artists can be a really useful tool in this whole communication and the connection, I think that will be a really valuable point to make. And a big thank you. This council allowed me to build a straw bale house, and it was the first domesticated building of straw bale 20 years ago, and I'm still living in it. And thank you, Cornwall Council.
And Christine, was there something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I was just going to say a lot of the community organisations are run by volunteers, and there's absolutely no reason why volunteers can't be young people as well. So if there's a whole generation of enthusiastic climate change activists, please take the time not only to carry on doing what you're doing, but to volunteer and support the other community groups that are also trying to battle climate change in their own way.
And Oliver, was there anything you wanted to say on this at all?
Well, I'd actually put my hand down again because I think most of it is said. I mean, I think this is a fabulous part of this discussion because my own feeling is that we, and I know other people share this, that we shouldn't be relying on the structures and institutions and corporations that have brought us to this place to be the same ones to get us out of this place. I think we can make an exception in terms of Cornwall Council because it's our own council, our own democratically elected council. So we can excuse, yeah, we can leave that one aside. But I think that we have so much in Cornwall, and so much. What Shelley's just said is brilliant because our inventiveness in Cornwall is born of having to look after ourselves, and we know, our communities look after themselves. It's not the same as it was 50 years ago, but it could be the same very quickly again, and we've seen this through COVID, and it's the idea that somehow we always need to rely on somebody else. Well, let's leave that aside and let's just rely on the bonds that we have with each other to be able to get us out of this mess.
Thank you. And Rob, was there anything you wanted to add?
Sorry, I'm afraid I've just had an internet outage due to the wonderful way that central government funds our rural connectivity. So I've missed the last couple of minutes. I know I shall keep quiet and let you carry on.
No problem at all. Well, that probably is all we've got time for this evening anyway. So thank you to everybody for joining us. Remember, you can continue the conversation online on the Cornwall We Want website, and there's a link to that in the Facebook comments.